bring together our community to discuss ideas that some may be familiar with, others may not, about how we as Muslims can live a life that is more connected to the earth. And we address many different issues during these meetings, whether it be dealing with environmental activism or spending time in nature, or a very popular theme these days is the whole homesteading movement amongst the Muslim community here in the United States. And so we are very happy to be able to continue these discussions, and we will be talking more about the Muslim homesteading experience today. But before we get started, I wanted to share one poem that I found that is accredited to Rumi, and it seemed so appropriate for today's discussion. So I will begin with this, and then I will pass things on to Sister Corey. I see it as entitled as These Exhaling Sounds, but whether or not Rumi referred to that title, I don't know. It goes as such. Is the sweetness of the cane sweeter than the one who made the cane field? Behind the beauty of the moon is the moon maker. There is intelligence inside the ocean's intelligence, feeding our love like an invisible water wheel. There is a skill to making cooking oil from animal fat. Consider now the knack that makes eyesight from the shining jelly of your eyes. Dawn comes up like a beautiful meal being served. We are hungry and distracted, so in love with the cook. So we will use that to get started in our discussion today about living together on this, or living on this earth, with this earth, in remembrance of our Creator, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I will pass things on to Corey to introduce our speaker for today. Thank you all for joining us.
All right. So I'm going to introduce Sister Tenille. She's a married mother of 6, stepmom to 3. She has been home gardening for about 5 years and completed training as a master gardener in Nevada in 2015. She took permaculture design and training that same year in Oregon. She's also an avid quilter. Excuse me, let somebody in. She's also an avid quilter, as well as a full spectrum doula, having been trained by the renowned Black midwife, Shafia Monroe. If I said her name wrong, please correct me, Sister Tenille. Currently, Tenille lives off-grid with her husband and her youngest child in rural Georgia. And you can find her on Facebook talking about hip hop and her homestead at Tenille Fatima. And also on IG showcasing her quilts, that's how I first connected with her. Because my mother is a quilter, and my mother is like more traditional quilter, but Tenille has this like modern take that I really love. So that's how I found Tenille. So inshallah, let's get started. Sister Tenille, if you can unmute yourself. I'm trying to find you. Okay, here you go.
There we go. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
I appreciate being here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Alhamdulillah. Come on, let's do this. So how about let's start with this. Let's start with, what is homesteading?
What is homesteading? Okay. So there's like the Webster's definition of what homesteading is. Homesteading is a house or building, typically a farmhouse, on some acreage. Typically somebody's doing some farming on that acreage. That could include also like outbuildings, like stables or a barn or housing for farm workers. That's what a homestead is defined as. But when you think about a homestead, you can't really think about it without knowing like some of the historical context behind that word, especially in this country. I don't know if they use it in any other country. I think in the UK they call it a small holding or something like that. But in this country, like we're living on stolen land. So homestead has a settler colonial connotation when you hear it used among people, even now. But we define a homestead as any place where you can live your values without being hindered from doing so. So we're Muslims. Our homestead, we want to establish the prayer, like really establish the prayer without like confines that come with working a 9 to 5 or going to school for 10 hours a day, or, you know, we outside of the time constraints that you would find in a city. So a homestead for us is where can fully practice this deen. That can be in the city, you know, with a little container garden, or in a suburban area with some backyard chickens. That can be your homestead. We were just fortunate enough to be able to buy 10 acres recently. So, and we don't call our home a homestead, you know. That's what we're doing, I guess, by certain people's definitions, but that's not what we call it. We just call it home. So, alhamdulillah, that's how I would define it. Wherever you can live and practice your values.
Right. So I think it feels like with homesteading, there's an intention. There's an intention involved. You're not just, I don't know, just living on some land. You're living on some land with a direct intention to do some certain things, whatever those certain things are.
Yes.
So why did you and your family decide to homestead? And also, why Georgia?
Good question. So we didn't like sit down and say, you know what, one day I want to have a homestead. That never happened. You know, we were brought here, you know, we were brought to each other, like in our relationship, and we were brought to our homestead, to our land. I guess we think about, we all know what it's like to live in the city. I was born and raised in Vegas, you know. I know what that is, you know. I know what that city life is like. I know how fast it is. I know how sometimes you don't have room to breathe, room to be, room to think. And so once I became Muslim, I guess my perspective on being a part of creation, being what we call a Khalifa, began to manifest itself and change. Knowing what we know about the debt you're in when you live in a city, like you got to pay the rent, you got to pay the water bill, you got to pay the power bill, you know, phone, internet, cable, you know, whatever you're paying for. There's debt involved in living in the city. And then there's thinking about trust, and do we really place our trust in Allah to take care of our needs when we live in certain situations? Or are we more dependent on politicians or city planners or the government to take care of our needs, you know? And so just to make a long story a little bit shorter, we began doing small things to make what we believed to be the practice of Islam a manifest reality where we were. We started doing small things like recycling, you know, composting. My first garden was a container garden. I used to keep the little strawberry containers from the grocery store and start seeds in those. I knew a lady who was a florist, and she would give me all her rose buckets, and I would drill holes in those and plant lettuce and stuff, carrots in those. So we started small. We started very small, in a little house in a, you know, a HOA. And we knew we didn't want to continue with that kind of lifestyle where we didn't have complete control over what we can do where we lived. When you rent, you can't, unless you have permission from your landlord or HOA where you live, you can't alter the landscape. You know, you can't dig a swale if you wanted to and harvest rainwater. You know, you're bound by the laws of the town or place where you live. And we didn't want We didn't want to be tied by those binds. And so about 3 years ago, we began searching, maybe 4 years ago, we began searching for land. I guess I should go back a little. My husband stewarded a land project in I think it began in 2015, 2016 in Oregon. And it fell apart for a variety of reasons. But we always we knew we wanted to continue on the path of on land ownership in order to manifest these goals we had for aligning our lives with our values. And so we kept looking for a place, and there's a sister who we met through Facebook. Her name is Hadiya Majid, and she owned something like 50 to 100 acres of land down here, and she parceled it off to several people, and we were one of the people who got 10 acres from her. Really good price, alhamdulillah. And started paying her about 3 years ago. 3 years ago is when we start taking the steps to leave the city. We started accumulating lumber and tools and materials we knew we would need in order to build a life down here. And we had a lot of false starts. We had a lot of false starts where we said, okay, this is the summer where we're gonna get out of here, or this is the fall when we're gonna get out of here. And even the week when we finally did leave, it took us an extra 5 days just to get out, just to say today, today we're getting in the car, all our stuff is packed, and we out of here. And that's what we did. June 5th this year, we got out, and we're happy we got out. It was like a relieving moment when that happened. It took us 10 days to drive from Oregon to Georgia. I imagine other people could have made that journey a little bit shorter, but we were towing a camper, a 50-year-old camper, up and down hills through the Midwest. And it was just a lot of labor. And we made the intention to not just drive and tire ourselves out. Once we left the city, we began altering our thinking with regards to time and how we spend our time. And we don't have to drive for 8 hours a day in order to get there. We didn't have like a plan for arrival. Like, we have to get there on this day. We didn't have that. We just had like, look, we taking the drive, we got babies in the back seat, and we don't want to hear them crying a lot. We don't want any of the complaints or anything that comes with a really long, a tedious road trip. So we stopped at campsites, public land sites. We got a hotel, I think probably 3 of those nights, just because we couldn't find a campsite, or, it would have put us past a prayer time or something. We didn't want to do that. But it took us 10 days. We are happy to get through that. And yeah, alhamdulillah, we're here now.
So it looks like you gained a lot of peace, when you let go of
Yes.
a lot of the things that, that were holding you down in the city, kind of,
Yes.
you mentioned debt and like money issues. When you let go of all that, it seems like time to open up, and you had a lot of peace, and life started flowing a bit differently. That's what it sounds like from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, it was, again, like I mentioned already, tawakkul. When you decide that you're going to place your trust in Allah, like you doing the work, but the outcome is with Him,
Mm-hmm.
then that just really removes the burdens that we put on ourselves. It's like a freedom. It's a freedom from self-oppression. Like not only am I leaving a system of oppression, but I'm not oppressing myself no more either, you know? And yeah, once we decided to let go of those kinds of limiting thinking of boundless things like time, then, you know, it just became a little bit easier. I did a Facebook post about that, just expounding on thoughts about how we use time, you know. And it was as it relates to being off grid for the first time, but I guess it could be applied in a lot of avenues. We make stuff hard. We make it hard for ourselves when we think I have to push, I have to keep going, in spite of what our body is saying or the circumstances are saying. We make it too laborsome for ourselves, and the work loses the meaning when you do that. You forget about what your intention is for doing a thing when you're not giving yourself grace and space, you know, to move forward in a meaningful way, a slow and meaningful way if necessary.
So speaking of moving forward, what are your goals and your plans for your home?
Yeah. Wow. We got a lot of them. Like, I mean, we moved on to raw land. And when you say raw land, there's no structures there. There's no water. We don't have any infrastructure there. There's no plumbing. There's no, you know, electrical wires or nothing. So we got a lot of goals. We got a list of goals. I guess the most pressing ones at the moment are relief from heat and humidity. That's one. Making a space free of insects, which I'll try to talk about a little bit more. And the third thing is refrigeration. Those are our primary three. But I mean, like, my homesteading journey doesn't look like the next person's. That might not be like, this is somebody else in the same situation as me. They might approach it a little bit differently. They might be like, you know, I need to get out of this tent, you know? And we are making headway towards building our house right now. But that's not like the most pressing thing. When you got ants in your bed, that's pressing, you know? And like, what it brings to mind, I guess, is like, for me, especially with the ants, it's like, I think of Prophet Suleiman, alayhi salam, and that story in the Quran where his army is marching through this valley and there were ants there. And he was amused that she was like, y'all, let's get out the way so we won't get stepped on. And he was amused at that. And so I'm looking at these fire ants that's biting me when I'm trying to relax. And I'm like, Allah, help me to be amused. But I can't find it. I can't find it. So it's just like little moments like that where your deen manifests itself. Like stuff you've been taught, you know, in your madrasa or sitting with your imam or, you know, in a fundamentals class, stuff you've been taught with regards to Quranic ayah and hadith manifests itself out here. The kindness you should show to other creation, you know, that's, to me, is proper stewardship. Like when you're thinking of how to do that in real time. It's also like appreciating being out here in the elements and what do you need when you're out here, you know. That's not to say we didn't take, you know, we didn't do any planning with regards to housing or water. We did, you know, we thought through a lot of things, a lot of temporary solutions and long-term solutions. But no amount of preparation you do can prepare you for the reality of a situation you've never been in before, you know. It's a lot. It's a lot. Alhamdulillah, I started therapy way before we moved here. Else I would have probably been like feeling like I'm on an island out here a little. But anyway, I feel like I'm getting off on a tangent. To answer your question, our primary intention here is to establish the prayer. That's our primary goal here. We notice, like, just in our driving around in some of the neighboring towns, that this is a food desert also. So one of our other long-term goals is to gift our surplus to people here. Like, they have a small farmer's market here. And it's needed, you know, fresh food is needed here. But being able to gift nutrient-dense food would be like, I want the barakah and the ajr that would come from doing that. You know, we want that for ourselves. One of the income options we're doing here that we're already started is we're going to start a nursery here. We feel like if people in a small town situation like this were empowered to grow their own food instead of being dependent on the grocery stores here, then perhaps, you know, we can motivate them to do that. Inshallah, we're also going to be doing some chicken breeding. We got about 17, maybe 19 chickens right now, 19 chicks. We have an incubator. So we thought, you know, the primary business for chickens is you either selling the chicks or you selling the birds for meat. You know, you either selling eggs, chicks, or birds. And we want to do something like that, like a full range of services based around the birds. We want people to be able to grow their own birds if they want to, or raise their own chickens if they want to. Another goal we have, I guess, would be to minimize waste. Like, we started minimizing our waste when we were in the city still, but I'm not satisfied with the amount of trash we have on our land. And I'm not saying it's like trash. What I'm saying is we throw away probably 4 or 5 bags of garbage a week. And to me, that's too much for people who don't even eat a lot of packaged food. And, you know, it's just too much. And so we're trying to minimize waste. That's a small goal. Also, a reduction of harm. We see a lot of racism, like open racism here. I mean, Deep South, you know, it kind of comes with the territory, I guess. But a minimization of harm. This town we live in is 70% Black. And the leadership is none of the leadership is Black, you know. And we see Confederate flags all over the place, you know. So that's like ongoing trauma, minimization of harm to the best of our ability. Trying to think of what that's it for now. That's all I can bring to mind right now.
Do you mind if I grow on the earlier question? So you're talking about these amazing goals that you have, but what about and you also spoke about not needing too organized a daily lifestyle either. But can you give us some idea of what your days are like right now, what things you're working on, and how you divide the time?
Yes. We're striving hard to design our lives here around the 5 prayers. We know that between Fajr and Dhuhr is our best block of time for getting any work or chores done. And that way, by the time the humidity and the heat set in, and the insects that come with your sweat, that come with you sweating a lot. We know that that's the time of day where we want to at least start showering and relaxing for the remainder of the day in some shade. So we have the Fajr to Dhuhr block of time where we do our work. I cook breakfast and I cook dinner in the morning. If I'm cooking that day, because I'm not cooking every day. It's too hot. So we have the Fajr to Dhuhr block. Between Dhuhr and Maghrib, that's when we're showering, reading, studying. I'm like binging Girl at that time. Helping my son build stuff with his blocks and planning for the next day, planning any errands we have to run. We also use the time between Dhuhr and Maghrib to do any errands in the town, because being in the truck is a time to get a lot of nice breezes, evaluate what everyone else is doing, like on their property. And what I mean by that is we see a lot of people whose homes are like set back away from the road. And I think that's because being in the trees is cooler, you know? And that seems like such a simple thing that people probably wouldn't notice, but in order to thrive here in this type of heat and humidity, you need some shade. So we're seeing what other people are building, what kind of structures and materials they're using to build their spaces. We're noticing like the gardens and acres of cotton and corn that some of our neighbors are building, you know, what other people do during this time of day. Of course, Maghrib to Isha, we're either preparing to sleep or, you know, dhikring or something like that during that time. Our nights, we're trying to structure our nights for worship and sleep. Like focused worship, like dhikr, dua, and the reading of Quran between Maghrib and Isha prayer.
So I do see we have a question coming in, if I may go ahead. One of the listeners is asking if either you or your husband are working, and if so, how do you fit it in with your schedule? Work outside of the work of the home, of course.
Yes, of course. My husband is a bookkeeper. He manages several businesses, and that's where the majority of our income comes from. I'm a quilter and a doula. I don't do my doula work very much since I left Oregon, but I do make and sell custom quilts. And that's what we do right now. But we want most of our needs, including our financial needs, to come from the land. And so that's where our goals for starting a nursery and the chicken business are coming from. I'm also, for myself, planning, I don't know if I should talk about it yet, but it's something that relates to the land, to quilting, and to the prayer. I'm trying not to give too much away about that, just because it's still in its formative stages. I'm doing a lot of sewing and work in that regard, but I'll leave that part alone. But that's what we do for work. And we're usually doing that between Dhuhr and Asr time also, because that's the time we spend away from the land if we have to, and escape from the heat.
So how about, how did you prepare yourself and your family to start this journey? Because if I told my family, hey, we're going to go to rural Georgia in the summer and live in some tents and and be attacked by ants, they would be like, no.
Yeah. I'm gonna tell you, I have one of my daughters is 17 years old. Okay, so very briefly, my two oldest children live in Arizona. My husband's 3 children live in California. So at home with us at the time was my 17-year-old, my 11-year-old, my 8-year-old, and my 3-year-old. Come on, my 17-year-old was like, really? Outside? You want me to sleep outside? It wasn't, it was a lot of talking, a lot of, for ourselves, dua, for direction, a lot of praying istikhara for guidance in this journey to make sure it's, you know, in alignment with what Allah wants. And, but a lot of talking. We had a lot of family meetings about this, but there's also addressing needs. You know, we had a lot of conversations about, okay, we know that there's not going to be any running water. We know there's not going to be a four-walled structure, hard structure on the land. We know it's going to be hot. We know that in the winter, we're going to need some heat. We know that there will be, you know, we had a lot of conversations about these things for years in advance. One of the things we did was move to Oregon. Oregon is a literal hub for learning any kind of sustainability, back to basics, homesteading, any kind of skill like that. Herbalism, blacksmithing, woodworking, quilting, any skill, gardening, that's where you want to go. If you and your family are ever looking for a place, just a transitional city, Eugene is it. Eugene, Oregon is it. I'm saying that because when you go from, for example, my husband's from LA. You go from LA to Eugene, you have no choice but to slow down. You know, you have no choice but to breathe and be present and determine what your next move is going to be. Because it's not the same hustle. It's not the same. LA is like Niagara Falls, rapids, you know. Eugene is like a stream, you know, a stream where you can cool your feet. You know, it's the perfect transitional place. So we moved to Oregon. And we learned a lot of skills that we thought would be valuable for living out here.
Like what?
My husband's a bookkeeper, but his hobby is woodworking. That's how he learned to build our home. He learned to build our home in Oregon. I learned how to quilt there. I got trained as a doula there. But the sitting with people who live a certain lifestyle can changes your thinking about it. Paying attention to disparities in cities. You know, you get kicked out of your house if you don't pay for water, even though water is a right. You need it or you'll die, you know? But if you don't pay for water, you get your water shut off, you know?
Unless you're a company, unless you're a big company,
yeah.
you have to pay for water.
I mean, like having shelter, like when you think of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food, shelter, warmth, you know, water, these basic needs that every human being needs. We have to pay for those, you know, and if we don't pay for those, we lose our shelter, our food, our water. And to me, that's against justice. It goes against justice. It goes against the tenets of our faith, you know. And learning about things like that, learning about how roads are paved with riba, you know, how it's just like riba is the blood of cities. That's how cities function. That's how cities are built.
And especially in Black neighborhoods. I remember visiting Biloxi, Mississippi. And the reason I knew I was in the Black part of Biloxi, Mississippi, is because there were so many caching places. And you know, Biloxi, Mississippi is known for gambling. So there were so many check cashing places and those type of stores where you could turn in your goods and then get a loan on it and then come get it back later if you have the money. I don't even know what that's called, but that's
Loan
how you
shark.
know. Yeah, loan shark. That's how you know you in a black part of town.
Yeah, it's like that here. Like the poor black towns, man, they get shafted. Like you can drive from Bartow, Georgia, and see more abandoned buildings, more abandoned businesses. And it's not just like due to COVID. This is like standard. People have left their houses, and there's just empty houses everywhere, empty businesses everywhere. Drive down the same road through Riddleville, Georgia, where it's a larger white population, and you see all these lawns, well manicured lawns. You see people with thriving businesses. The disparity is like, it's crazy. And I mean, I guess we kind of got off onto another conversation. But
Well, if there's a relation to your decision, then it's very appropriate, actually.
I get it. It's just, it's a lot. It's a lot to think about. But so we saw like those kinds of disparities, and how I hate to say we're powerless, because we're not powerless. What we decided to do was just, you know what, we can do something about this. We don't have to depend on the grocery store for our food. We can grow our food. We started growing a garden in our front yard. We don't have to go to the grocery store to buy eggs. We can raise chickens in our backyard. We can raise some hens and go pick fresh eggs every morning. And we know what they're eating. We know what's gone into them. We know their nutritional contents. Now we're at a place where we're saying we don't have to pay a water bill. We can haul water. There's freshwater springs here. We drive an hour to Augusta, and there's a freshwater spring that some Boy Scouts attached the faucet to, and the residents of Augusta drive there with their water bottles and fill those up for free when they don't have a well on their property, or they don't have city water.
There's a sister in the chat from the UK that says water is the only bill where if you don't pay, the council won't cut it off because it's seen as a right. I didn't know that about the UK, but I think it's really cool that the Boy Scouts, the Boy Scouts are cool. They did that. They set up that spring so that people can get fresh water.
It was literally a pipe before. We had one of the residents there tell us that it was a pipe sticking out of a rock. And the Boy Scouts came and built a platform where people can rest like these huge containers of water. They built some spigots and they took care of their neighbors. They knew their neighbors needed it. They knew it was older people going there to get their water. And so they did the service for them, So that's like, we didn't want the debt associated with that anymore. We didn't want to oppress ourselves. We didn't want to fund anyone else's oppression. We just didn't want to continue the same old and complain about it. We didn't want to be complaining about a lifestyle that Allah gave us some power to change. And so we decided not to do it anymore. We determined our needs: food, access. We wanted some proximity to people who've lived this lifestyle before. There are a lot of farmers down here, Black farmers in particular, because the cultural connotation of this is significant for us too. We wanted
Can you explain that cultural connotation for people who may not understand what you're talking about?
Yeah, so historically, like enslaved Black people were forced to do agricultural things. If we can go back further and say they came from agricultural practices on the continent in West Africa. They came here and were forced to do that. It did not benefit them. It benefited someone else and built the economy for this nation. And then once slavery was eradicated, they took that back and became landowners, even though they went through some known common hardships with that. But we also have family members who used to live here, used to do sharecropping here, moved to the West Coast, and they didn't share all of those skills with us, even though we knew that they did those things, for their families and for their benefits. They were landowners and they were farmers. And so we wanted to take that back. We wanted to take back our cultural roots as people who grow things, people who feed themselves, people who empower themselves through those kinds of actions. And we also wanted it to be known that there were Muslims who did that, Some of those enslaved people were Muslims and they were farmers. And here we are, we're Muslims, and we're not going to be farmers, but we will be growers, and just keep that tradition. It's part of our traditional and part of our heritage.
So
Now,
someone, you want to go ahead?
I'm eyeing the question that hasn't been answered on the side, but I have one as well, if you don't mind me breaking in, Corey. Tenille, I myself have just started learning about this whole concept of homesteading over recent months, and it does seem to be a movement within the Muslim American community. Did you notice this before your family had the decision to move to Georgia? Is it something was occurring in your community? Is it predominantly Black Muslims, American Muslims who are doing this? Or is it something within the Muslim community as a whole, according to your observations? And anyone else is welcome to give me their thoughts as well.
I think it's, we've noticed a uptick in people wanting to go back to the lands of all denominations and faiths. In general, you see young people. I think the biggest group are young people who want these skills, who want to live this way. And they're unafraid. Like, they don't have like I guess when you get past 40, you start to feel like, I can't do that. I'm not going out there and sweating and having these bugs around. I'm not doing it, but young people don't have that. They like, is it the right thing to do? Will my family benefit from it? I'm gonna do it, But yeah, I am also seeing like an uptick in Black people and Muslims going back to these skills and reclaiming not just agricultural skills, but their ancestral skills, things that their grandparents and great-grandparents used to do, and bringing that forward and showing that it's a viable and beneficial way of living. It's hard, it's hard, but we can do hard things. I watched this lady on YouTube named Esther Emery, and she has this whole talk about, it's titled "In Defense of Doing Hard Things." Like, we tend to think that because it's outside the norm, or what are people going to say, or I can't do that. We have these limiting fears that makes us think that hardship is bad. That, and I'm not talking about like poverty or anything. I'm talking about like challenging yourself to do what you can do, what Allah put within you to do, you can do it. Like if you have the thought, like, I want to do that one day, you can do it. Allah give you that thought. That came from somewhere. It came from someplace real. And you shouldn't ignore it. You know, when you get that kind of, I think that's guidance. Like when you get divine guidance and divine glimpses of other ways of living, you should look into it, get into it. Start with it on a small scale. Like put your apple seeds in some soil in a strawberry container, you know, and see what happens, you know.
There was this
Go ahead.
there was this teacher whose class I was taking, and one of the things that he mentioned was that when you get a thought, like you were saying, a thought to do something, something that's positive, like I can do this, I want to do this. That's definitely from Allah, because just think of Adam. When Adam was told the names of all the things, Adam soaked that in. He could do it. He knew he could do it because Allah put that in him, right? But when there's something that is putting self-doubt in you, that's probably from Shaitan. That's probably, you need to just cut that out, because Allah didn't make us so that we would be scared to do things. Allah made us like Adam. He knew all the names of all the things. Did the angels know that? No. Allah gave that to Adam, right? So like when you have that idea to do that thing, just like you said.
Do that. And ask for guidance in it. You know, it's like I mentioned to you in a conversation, Corey, think of Hajar, you know, think of Hajar radiallahu anha. When Allah told Ibrahim alayhi salam to leave her, she was like, then he ain't gonna abandon us in it. If Allah gives you that idea, he not gonna leave you alone to manage it all by yourself. He gonna give you people, he gonna give you resources, he gonna give you time, he gonna give you space, he gonna give you energy. He's gonna give you the wherewithal to get it done. And you have to accept that. That's tawakkul. Trust that he knows you and that you got what it takes to do that hard thing. I have to tell myself that really often in this situation, you know, especially when it's hot. Like I'm from the desert, but I'm not from humidity. And so when I'm sweating, I'm like, Lord, how am I going to finish today? And then I think of Hajar radiallahu anha. He ain't gonna abandon us in it. He brought us to the door. Al-Fatah opens the way. You just gotta walk the way. He brings you to the door and he go open it for you. You have to walk through the door. And that's all you can do in this situation or in any other. If he brings you to the door, walk through the door.
And a lot of times, so Allah puts you in that situation specifically so that you will call on him even more.
Yes.
So, alhamdulillah, Allah's loving you because you calling on him all the time.
Believing in you. You know, that's a relationship. One who wants you believing in him, and he believing in you too. He's telling you what you can do. He's telling you what he puts you here for. And it's not just like I had this conversation on in one of these WhatsApp groups I'm in about purpose, you know. And we're talking about, is there just like purpose with a capital P, or is there like a lot of little P's? And for me, it's like a lot of little P's. Like you have a lot of small purposes that add up to one big purpose. You know, these little signposts on the way, or experiences on the way, that at the end of it, you get a complete life. And it's for the one who gave you life. It's for Al Hayy, you know. What were you going to say, sister? Okay.
Well, we have a few minutes left, but there's a question from Fatima Fatima Al-Maliki that I also had. So it's like, what's the number one thing, and it might be what we already talked about. What's the number one thing that you've learned on this journey thus far?
Oh, number one thing, um, I think there's two things.
Go with it.
The first one is you have to trust Allah and trust yourself. Stay firm on your principles and on your beliefs, even if other people don't support you. Like your family, my family is like, what are you doing? My best friend is like, girl, no, what are you doing? My kids, my kids are like, Mom, what are you doing? You know, but you got to stay firm on your beliefs and put your trust in Allah. It's the first thing. I think the second thing is, even if you feel prepared, you still might find that you didn't make the right choice. And my example for that is like the tents we live in. Kodiak Canvas makes the best tents ever. And I'm gonna say that if I was a spokesperson for them, then I would say that. They ain't even gotta pay me. They make the best tents ever. But canvas plus humidity equals mildew. So that just wasn't a good purchase for this climate. Even if you feel prepared, you might still find that you didn't make the right choice, and that's okay. What ends up happening is that you're learning. So you're not at a loss anywhere. You're not ever going to be in a loss. So trust the law and take whatever preparation that you can possibly take, and it might be wrong still.
That sounds like trusting Allah and tie your camel. That sounds kind of similar.
Yeah, it's something like that. It's something. Yeah.
Right. So thank you so much, Sister Tenille. Is there, we're about at the end of our time. Is there anything else that you wanted to share before we close this out?
For anyone considering this way, pray a lot of istikhara, make a lot of dua for yourself, that Allah will give you what you need in the circumstances that you're looking for. Save your pennies. You never know when Allah's going to give you the opportunity that you're praying to Him for. 3 is KonMari your stuff. You don't need a lot of stuff to move out here. So KonMari your stuff. And again, I'll just finish with praying also. Start with prayer and finish with prayer.
Sister Seven, did you want to say something?
I have too many thoughts right now, but I wanted to let you know this is the best khutbah I have heard in ages. It was all so appropriate at so many levels of life. So Sister Tenille, thank you so much for sharing that personal journey that you yourself have gone through and are still going through. This was definitely a different perspective on the whole homesteading concept, and it was the hour flew by. Thank you so much.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it so much. It was fun.
Good. I'm glad you had a good time. I'm so glad you had a good time. So before we close out, I wanted to take a quick moment again to also ask everyone to make a dua for Brother Omari from Fitcher Farms. We had him on here a while ago, and Brother Omari was in an accident, and a very tragic accident, and paralyzed. He was out. They didn't think he was going to make it, but alhamdulillah, he's like off the breathing machine now. So it's like, and he's moving body parts now. So alhamdulillah, he's making such progress. So even if you don't know Brother Omar, make dua for him, his wife, and they have like 9 kids, and they're like chicken farmers and homesteaders as well in Virginia. So just make dua, lift Brother Omari up, and ask for, complete shifa, inshallah. And I want to again to thank Sister Tenille. You can find her on Facebook at Tenille Fatima and also on Instagram at Tenille Fati. You can, if you want to talk about hip hop and homesteading and quilting, that's find her there, inshallah. And also, you can look for green Muslims and green Ramadan on your favorite social media platform. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Sister Tenille, again. And I'm gonna close out with Surah Asr, inshallah. Okay. Bismillah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wal asr. Innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilus salihati wa tawassaw bil haqqi wa tawassaw bis sabr. Ameen. Thank you so much, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for joining.